If you grew up in a time when family potluck recipes were passed down like treasure, written on index cards, tucked into cookbooks, or shared over kitchen counters, or maybe you're part of a younger generation where family secrets are handed over in a text message or saved on a thumb drive. No matter the era you grew up in, I am sure you've always wondered what happened to those potluck crowd pleasers that brought families and neighbors together, even in ordinary times, but have quietly vanished. The ones your mom, grandma, or great-aunt made perfectly every time without needing a measuring cup or a recipe card. In today's video, we will be looking at 25 low-budget, under-the-radar potluck dishes Grandma made that turned out to be a hit. Some you might remember, others may surprise you, and make sure you don't skip this video because by the end, you just might spot a dish from your childhood that you haven't thought about in years. We are starting this list with a classic that is still cherished across the Midwest, the South, and even Hawaii, the kind of comfort food that never made it back home with leftovers. Number 1, homemade bread. I know what you're thinking, bread at a potluck? Hear me out, this wasn't just any bread. For Grandma, showing up at potluck with anything store-bought was almost unthinkable, and she knew there would be attendees who had never tasted fresh homemade bread. While everyone else was showing off their green bean casseroles and Jell-O salads, Grandma would walk in with warm, golden homemade bread wrapped in her favorite tea towels. And let me tell you, people really looked forward to this bread because it had flavors that reminded you of your fondest childhood memories. Baking bread at home was easy, though it took a few hours. But Grandma said their reaction while eating the bread is always worth the effort. By the time the main course was served, every last crumb was gone, and people were already asking when she'd make it again. But just when you thought Grandma had peaked with something as simple as bread, she'd hit you with an appetizer that sounded weird and tasted delicious. Bacon-wrapped dates. This was Grandma's fancy appetizer that had everyone thinking she was a half-kitchen god and half-loving grandmother. At first, folks thought her sweet dates with crispy bacon sounded odd, but their opinion quickly changed when they tasted it. Sometimes she'd sneak in a bit of cream cheese or a toasted almond inside, but she never said a word about it. She'd arrange them on her best serving platter, watching as curious guests took hesitant first bites, then asked for seconds. The combination of sweet and salty was a magic nobody expected. They'd vanish faster than she could make them, and people talked about them for weeks after. Guests were hoping she'd brought extras because they were always gone within a few hours, leaving latecomers disappointed. Panzanella salad. While everyone else brought iceberg lettuce with ranch, Grandma showed up with this Italian bread salad that turned out to be a real crowd pleaser. The panzanella salad doubled as a salad and comfort food. It had chunks of day-old bread that soaked up tomato juices, olive oil, and whatever spices she thought were necessary. Folks in Little Italy neighborhoods knew this trick for using up stale bread, and Grandma never mixed it till she was at the potluck venue. The bread absorbed all those bright flavors to become a rustic food that had people asking what made it so good. They never knew it was yesterday's leftover bread transformed into something magical.
These kinds of dishes made potlucks unforgettable. Did you bring anything like this? Let us know in the comments.
Stewed cinnamon apples. This wasn't dessert, but it wasn't quite a side dish either. Grandma's stewed apples lived in that perfect space between sweetened with cinnamon and love. Potluck hosts would set them out next to the ham and pork roast, where they always disappeared fast. Kids would sneak spoonfuls when parents weren't looking, and the adults couldn't resist going back for more of that warm comfort food. The apples were soft, but not mushy, sweet, but not cloying, with a light, syrupy coating that clung to the spoon. They were a surprise hit every time, bridging the gap between dinner and dessert, leaving everyone satisfied but still wanting just one more bite from that nearly empty serving bowl. Chili con carne. Every church potluck in Texas had at least 3 different chili recipes, but Grandma's chili con carne was the one that had folks still debating long after the gathering. It was thick, rich, and loaded with beans. She'd ladle it from a huge pot, watching as people compared notes about heat levels and secret ingredients they'd never share. The smell would fill the entire fellowship hall, drawing people to the table before they'd even gotten their coats off. Men would go back for thirds, claiming they were testing the competition. But everyone knew the truth. Homemade cranberry sauce. While others opened cans with ridged marks, your mom arrived with ruby red cranberry sauce she made with cranberries. It was tart enough to make your mouth pucker, sweet enough to keep you coming back. This wasn't just for Thanksgiving. It showed up at spring potlucks, summer gatherings, and any time she wanted to add something special. It had that homemade, jammy texture that worked with turkey, ham, fried chicken, and almost everything on the table. Some folks even spread it on dinner rolls like it was jelly. The flavor was real, and the empty bowl always proved how good she made them.
Your mom probably didn't tell you about this, but she would also make extras and can them, and she'd give them out to young moms who are hustling between raising kids and building their careers.
Potato salad. This wasn't your typical potato salad, and I bet your mom had a version for every occasion. Loaded baked for picnics, classic with celery for church lunches, and warm German style for the colder months. My grandmother's version had chunks of bacon mixed through warm potatoes, and each bite had a richness that stuck with you. Men piled it high on their plates, claiming it was practically a main course, but their reason was that they knew it would disappear quickly. People would ask her for the recipe, then thank her at the next gathering. Old school pea salad. Frozen peas mixed with cheese, onions, and mayonnaise to hold it together was simple food your grandma made for a potluck that became a crowd pleaser. She would make it in her largest bowl and let it chill in the fridge, because she knew it tasted even better after sitting for a while or even overnight. The peas stayed crisp. The cheese added richness, and the whole thing was refreshing in a way that surprised everyone. Older folks couldn't get enough of this old-school pea salad. Kids would pick at it curiously, then come back for more. Adults would take small servings at first, then return for generous seconds. By the end of the evening, that big bowl would have completely disappeared. Mac and cheese with honey cornflake topping. By the late 60s, mac and cheese had shown up at just about every potluck table, and folks were starting to pass it over, including the popular Betty Crocker's Muggo lunch. But Grandma's version made people stop in their tracks. She added that magical cornflake topping, drizzled with honey. Suddenly, those same tired, mushy noodles became the first thing people reached for. Kids would finish theirs, and adults would be trying to figure out the secret that made it so much better than ordinary mac and cheese. Grandma would tell them the honey helped the cornflakes caramelize just enough to surprise people, and added sweetness that balanced the sharp cheese below. Roasted root vegetables. Before viral YouTube videos of how roasted vegetables are good for your health, your mom was already doing it the right way with carrots, potatoes, and turnips. She'd mix them with oil and herbs, then roast them until they were caramelized and perfect. This was humble food that tasted expensive with simple ingredients transformed by time and heat. Most people who ate them don't know how to roast a vegetable properly, so the taste caught them off guard. People would treat them like the star of the meal instead of just a side dish as they load their plates. The edges were crispy, the centers were tender, and the whole thing had a sweetness that only came from proper roasting. If we've mentioned a simple dish that reminded you of good times, go ahead and hit that like button. It lets us know we're stirring up the right memories.
Italian meatballs with honey. These weren't your spaghetti meatballs. It was more of a sweet and savory fusion. Your mum's version was glazed with a sweet and tangy sauce that made them irresistible as finger food. She'd arrange them on toothpicks, and folks would pop them like candy. The honey made them sticky. The garlic gave them depth, and the BBQ sauce tied it all together. She'd bring 2 full platters, and they ran out before the main course was even served. Men wooed her for the recipe all afternoon, but she'd just smile and say it was a family secret.
Shaved Brussels sprout salad. Back when most people still thought Brussels sprouts were punishment food, Grandma was already turning them into healthy crowd pleasers. Her version was made with paper-thin shaved sprouts mixed with crumbled bacon and tangy blue cheese, all dressed in a sharp Dijon vinaigrette. The longer it sat, the more those bold flavors softened and blended. It was raw, it was bold, and it converted more Brussels sprout haters than any other dish. People would approach it cautiously because the name doesn't sound too exciting, but they came back for seconds with surprised expressions. Hot bean dip. This wasn't just any bean dip. This was the hot, bubbly, irresistible version that had people talking about the slow cooker all evening. Your mother probably made hers like my grandma's, with layers of refried beans, cheese, and spices melted together into a comfort food. She'd plug it in right after she arrived, but the organizers would insist on keeping it till certain guests arrived. Folks would load up tortilla chips, then come back with spoons when the chips ran out. Grandma's hot bean dip was so good, it worked for everyone, and even the vegetarians in the room went back for seconds. The cheese stayed perfectly melted, the beans were creamy, and there was never enough no matter how big the batch she made. 7-layer bars. If you remember magic bars, you know it tasted way better than it looked, and that's why Grandma called them her disappearing bars. If you asked your mother, she probably made hers with graham cracker crust, chocolate chips, coconut, nuts, and sweetened condensed milk, and then baked it until they were perfect and golden. She'd cut them into squares and people would break off chunks, chasing the perfect bite with all 7 layers. They were some of the easiest potluck desserts to make, and they got most people really excited. The chocolate stayed gooey, and the whole thing held together just long enough to make it from plate to mouth. Newcomers only eat one at first and always reach for another. Pizza rolls. Grandma was already making the real deal before the frozen ones filled up freezer aisles. If you saw your mother preparing this, she probably wrapped soft dough around cheese, pepperoni, and sauce, then baked them to a golden perfection. They were like tiny pizzas you could eat with your hands and always the first thing to disappear, even when someone brought store-bought ones. Grandma's pizza rolls were the kind you couldn't find in any Costco bag. They were warm, cheesy, and made with love. Adults would grab them as appetizers and tell the kids that hot cheese would burn their tongues. Zucchini apple crisp. When zucchini season hit and everyone was drowning in extra squash, your folks weren't worried because Grandma found a way to cook them into dessert. She would mix them apples and top them with a buttery crumb. It tasted so good that nobody could tell there was zucchini hiding in there, and people raved about it until they found out what was in it. They just knew it tasted amazing. Some took small servings at first, then came back for more once they realized how much better this version was. Grandma would smile and never reveal the secret ingredient until the pan was empty. Buffalo chicken dip. Grandma's version of buffalo chicken dip was the kind of dip that started conversations and ended arguments at every gathering. It had cream, homemade natural spices, and was loaded with shredded chicken that wakes up your taste buds. She'd present it to the hosts so that they'd serve it warm with tortilla chips she brought along. Sure, it was simple, but always a hit at potlucks. The cream cheese made it smooth. The hot sauce and the chicken made it substantial enough to be a meal. It was easy, delicious, and just plain addictive. Italian fondue. This wasn't your usual dainty cheese fondue because Grandma's version had Italian sausage, red wine, and enough melted cheese to stop a room mid-sentence. She called it Italian fondue, but it felt more like a bubbling pot of family reunion magic. The tomato and herbs filled the air first, then the sharp cheddar and jack cheeses melted together with just enough wine to make you feel luxurious at a potluck. People dipped chunks of crusty bread, passed the bowl, and stirred the pot between laughs. It was messy, rich, and impossible to walk away from. Nobody expected fondue to taste like Sunday dinner, but once they had a bite, they kept coming back. Grandma just kept stirring, smiling and pretending she hadn't noticed the line forming again.
Some of these dishes feel like they were forgotten with time. Which one would you bring back to the next potluck if you could?
Pickle dip. At first glance, it looked like another pale bowl next to the chips you'd skip. But once people took a bite, everything changed. She mixed tangy dill pickles into cool, creamy cheese, making it the most surprising hit of the table. Grandma always set it out with plain potato chips, and those two created magic. The crunch of the pickles, the smoothness of the dip, the sharp, sour edge that lingered on your tongue. It was weird, wonderful, and addictive. Some folks didn't get it, but those who did hover close, laughing between bites, making sure they got their share before the bowl was scraped clean like the rest. Taco dip. You didn't need a plate for this one, just a sturdy chip and a little determination. Grandma's taco dip always showed up in a clear glass dish, each layer stacked with care like a church window made of beans, cheese, and lettuce. By the time folks made it to the table, the top was scattered with crumbs, and the sides were scraped clean. People would dig deep for that perfect bite, then pause, wide-eyed, like they'd just tasted something heavenly. It was cold, creamy, and packed with flavor. The kids loved it. The adults fought for it. And no matter how much she brought, it was always gone in minutes. Grandma would just nod and smile, then take a moment to share her recipe with some interested moms. Egg salad with Fritos. Grandma would walk in with a simple bowl of egg salad and a bag of Fritos. The meal didn't need to look fancy, and before the casseroles even hit the table, this strange little combo would be half gone. She said it was just something she threw together one day, but people loved it and kept talking about it like it was five-star food. The creamy eggs, the salty crunch, the unexpected corn flavor all just worked. Even at potlucks full of gourmet dishes, this was the first to disappear. Folks would scoop it onto the chips like tiny deviled eggs, take one bite, and look around for more. Grandma never said much. She just smiled when they came back with empty hands.
If these stories brought back a warm memory or two, we'd love to have you stick around. To keep these memories alive, we share stories like this every day on our channel or community. If that sounds like your kind of table, go ahead and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.